Today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is the prosecutor. In the previous Conscious Leader series, we opened the topic of pride. So if you haven't watched it, go back and to watch these videos. I've also given an overview of the map of consciousness designed by Dr. David R. Hawkins, where we went over the different levels of consciousness, and now we're just kind of diving in so that you can let go of the different things that hold you back in your consciousness going up, and what are the different models. So back to pride, there's different things that show up in pride. One of them is the prosecutor, and that's what we're talking about today. So as I share some of the stories, just reflect back on what you are doing in your life, how this is showing up for you, because pride is a super common thing, right? Doesn't mean that is your level of consciousness if this shows up for you, because this is so common, the energy of pride. And the prosecutor specifically, that almost all of us at some point start buying into it. And for many of us, this subconsciously shows up many times a day. All right, so here's an example of a prosecutor. Some of you know in my previous life, I was a restaurant owner, and I owned a small gluten-free cafe in Boulder. And everything was great, especially on the outside. Customers marveled at the ambiance and the food and all that. And at one point we were on the CNN and all that. It was, it was great. It was great food. I definitely was not happy. Okay. For the first 2 years, I could not get away. For the love of me, I could not get away. I was always there, always working. I was the first one in, last one out. And so every morning I showed up to the restaurant before anybody else. Right, and I open the door, I close it behind me, and I look around, and the first thing I noticed was the floor wasn't swept. And I go like, oh my God. How many times have I explained to people that they have to close down properly, they have to sweep the floor? Right? Do you have to be totally incapable to work here? How is it possible that people cannot do their job? So it was this immediate frustration, immediate resentment. It's like, right? And then I go into the kitchen. I'm like, oh my God, they did not make the damn prep list. How many times have I told you before you leave, you have to make the prep list? Right. So it was like that, right? And, I felt really justified. They're really not doing their job, and they're not even trying, right? And the staff rolls in an hour later, and I find myself acting nice enough just to maintain the relationships and make everybody not quit. But you're going to see between the lines that I just saw myself as better than them, and just, oh my God, they're total idiots, right? They can't do anything right. So that is the prosecutor. That is essentially what they do, because they regard themselves as superior to others, right? And it's not that I regard myself in all of my life like that, but it shows up under pressure. It shows up as a defensive role. We show up as the prosecutor. Okay, so, the prosecutor, what do they do? Well, they prosecute, right? And what do they get out of it? They get to be superior, and they get to be in control. And they get to be better than anybody else. That's why it's pride. That's a level of pride, right? They see people as inferior to them. They have to, because that's what keeps them in control. Underneath the prosecutor, there's also a narcissistic view. We see what we want to see. We want to see other people as total idiots and incapable, and we don't see their true potential, right? Narcissistic view, by the way, is at a level 140 at the map of consciousness. It's at the level of desire, because we see what we want to see. We don't see reality. Our perception is totally clouded by what we want to see. And just to prove the prosecutor to be right. And then we go venting to others. We like to complain. How many times I would call my husband, and I would say, husband at the time, and I would say, oh my God, Hunter's a total idiot. He just put an entire cup of baking soda into the batter, not a spoon. By the way, that did happen. We had some people who smoke weed because, it's Colorado. You got to be careful about that. Anyway, so I was like, oh my God, who hired these people? I did, right? But I wasn't willing to take responsibility for that. And then for prosecutor, what shows up sometimes is this subtle guilt tripping. And just see if you can locate that within you if you do that sometimes. It's like subtle guilt trips, right? It will show up just like, maybe just like a side, like, look how exhausted I am because I have to make up for, you being an idiot and not you doing your job right. Maybe you've done it at work, or maybe with your husband or with kids or whatever. It's just like, oh my God, just like little subtle guilt trips of how much we have to do. And underneath that, there's also a sense of defeatism that I experience. There's this like, this always going to be like this. There's a sense of there's no way out. It's like, this is how it's always going to be, right? There's nothing to do about it. So in the end, the prosecutors tend to feel enslaved and entrapped in their situation. And the imaginary demands that are put on them, they really aren't, right? But they make up this idea that there's demands on them, and they are the only one who can do the job right. They also want to get out, but they don't know how. Right? So we become entrapped in this whole cycle in business when we end up doing everything ourselves. We don't trust other people to do it right, so we work harder and harder and harder. And as you know, 9 out of 10 businesses go out of business because eventually we can't handle it and we burn out, and other people can't learn, so the business can't grow. So there's a huge impact on our business. And the sooner we learn to give up the prosecutor, the I know the best, and we start trusting other people, the sooner we can grow as leaders in our business. Makes sense? What else is there? What else is there? Oh, this is what I wanted to talk about. When prosecutors show up, there's always a victim that goes along with the prosecutor, okay? And this is the Carpenter drama triangle, the original prosecutor, victim, rescuer. They always show up at the same time. And it's not that the prosecutor is causing the victim and the poor victim, oh my gosh, right? It's not like that. The victims play along willingly. So whenever you have a prosecutor, you also have some disempowered people who just play a victim and who just throw their hands in the air and all of a sudden don't know how to do anything, right? The victim is at level 180 at the map of consciousness. The prosecutor is at the level 185 on the map of consciousness. So both are at the level of pride. Neither of them is better because they're both below the level of integrity, but they like to play together. All right, so they always show up together. That those are energies, and they sort of like use us human as a host, and they show up together and they play along, right? So neither of them is more right. Even though the victims tend to feel more justified, and then you have a rescuer come in and try to protect the victim, and you might have seen that dynamic too, and I have seen that in the business, and we'll talk about the rescuer later, one of the next few weeks. So, before you start feeling guilty about this persecutorial behavior, just realize that this is just an energy that likes to get a hold of us and, play their thing. So our job is to notice it and let it go, right? And how do we do letting go? I'll talk about it in one of the next videos, the technique of letting go, but it's really just feeling into it and letting it go through us instead of acting on it, right? And that's why I outlined some of the other energies that show up, right? Not just the pride of the prosecutor, also the narcissism, the wanting to see the way we see things, the guilt tripping, the enslavement and defeatism that show up. So just try to reflect on where that shows up for you and in which situations and which roles, meaning, in a family role as a mother, for example, or in a business role, or, within your sisters or brothers or whatever, right? Just notice where that shows up. and start noticing it and start letting it go and realizing that it's a total illusion. Okay, it's a total illusion to prosecutor. And the impact is that when you don't take responsibility for this, then it allows other people to play the victims, and that's not leadership, right? That's like the opposite of leadership. That's when we disempower people. Empowering people means letting them grow out of the victim and take responsibility and take charge and be innovative and own whatever they're doing without somebody else having to jump in and tell them they're wrong or rescuing them or whatever. Okay, so that's the topic for this week. Hope this is useful. And next week we're going to discuss one of the other models of this triangle. All right, talk soon.